I want to show one thing, and then that
Yeah.
speaks to what you said, which is the president's failure to support Machado
Mm,
or the Gonzalez, who won the election
right.
2 years ago. Here is the CNN morning show. Typically does not book any guests worth listening to. There, I say it. But this morning they had the former CIA bureau chief, station chief rather, from Caracas on, and he was fascinating on the question of why the president is not, at least not now, supporting the two opposition leaders, both of whom are currently in Europe. His name is Rick De La Torre, and again, you don't often see a former CIA official with such expertise speaking so publicly. Here's that.
Well, I don't think the power just turns on from one moment to the next, right? You know, there has to be a period of time where we get to assess what's happening on the ground, and those that obviously have some choices to make. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a number of generals within the Venezuelan military that are plotting their way to get to either Moscow or Havana and abandon their posts because they realize that their time is rather limited. To the extent that you were to bring her in, it would just create more chaos at this moment. Right? So I think over the short term, we have to pinch our noses, and we're going to have to deal with Delcy Rodriguez, sadly, until the situation improves in such a way that we can afford to bring back Maria Corina Machado and others back in the.
So Eli, again, I'm not trying to cheerlead this, and of course we should all be on guard for things to go terribly wrong. There's lots that could, but it seems like they've got a plan here, which is to deal with the current government, to say to them, play ball by our rules, start reforming, start thinking someday about an election, let our oil companies come in, and that's fine because that's stability.
Yeah, I think that's right. And insofar, and if that's what happens, that's good. The problem is there's a lot of ifs, and if Trump loses interest and they figure out ways to delay and delay and delay, you might just have a continuation of the regime, much like you saw with the death of Fidel and Raul Castro. It's still a communist dictatorship, except that Castro is not in charge. So we have to make sure that, we stick to that. But right now, I mean, the broader implications that I think there's one thing to point out here, which is if you look at the long scope, and you're great at this, Mark, when Trump comes in his first term, he alienates the CIA. If you remember, this is the beginning of what I think sowing the seeds of distrust that we're seeing throughout MAGA of what they call the deep state. He gives that really fiery speech. He blames the CIA for trying to set him up, and to a certain extent, there was a merit to that case. To then to see now, we're talking 9 years later, Trump praising to the heavens the skills of the CIA and the national security state for pulling off this incredible operation is really telling. And I think it shows that Trump is much more in command of the government in his second term than he was in his first term.
Yep.
And I really wonder if there's going to be, politically speaking, how is a lot of MAGA, the Tucker audience, the people who have given in to Candace Owens and a lot of these conspiracies, what do they say when the leader of their movement is saying the CIA performed brilliantly, and it was my policy? Now that right there is, I think, an extraordinary part of the story. And then the other thing is, they're calling it the Don Rowe doctrine. He is bringing back this idea of great power, competition, and spheres of influence. That might be, in my view, have negative consequences when it comes to Ukraine, because that's the argument that Moscow makes about Ukraine. Yep. But it's very powerful, I think, in terms of Venezuela. And what he was saying last night on the plane is extraordinary. He's saying, I don't know how long we're going to see the regime in Cuba last, now that they've lost their main source of their economic lifeline.
Yep.
And all that's true. And that, I think, will be going down as yet another enormous accomplishment, on top of Trump pretty much taking out the Iranian nuclear program, brokering the return of the hostages and the ceasefire in Gaza. From a foreign policy perspective, we are looking at one of the most successful, and probably the most successful president in my lifetime.
All right,
at this
Mark,
point.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, Easier than a walk in the park. Hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and Two Way Tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.